All right, we're live, and for the first time, Nate, I have Steve from Southern Law. How are you doing, Steve?
Guys?
It's kind of funny because I'm not the smartest person on the planet. I've had Steve on my Eric Hunley channel multiple times talking about Marilyn Manson because he's done a ton of work there, and I realized, oh, wait a minute, this is a legal panel, and he is a lawyer. I really probably should be having Steve over here with all the, all the gang, and we're waiting for, well, Joe, good old Joe. Who knows when Joe is going to show up? He may show up whenever Joe shows up. And Jeff from Legal Vices is doing a show right now. He told me he's, going to come over as soon as he wraps up. But for the moment, we do have a story because Nate has put out a video. It has been completely blowing up like most of Nate's videos do. And I wanted to introduce everybody to this story by introducing, shall we say, the main character. Her name is Annie, right, Nate?
Annie Andrews. Yeah.
Annie. Okay. This is Annie talking about women in powerlifting.
Welcome to Anne Says Something Controversial. Why is women's bench so bad? I mean, not compared to me. We all know that I'm a tranny freak, so that doesn't count. And no, we're not talking about Mackenzie Lee. She's got little T-Rex arms and she's like 400 pounds of chest muscle, apparently. I mean, standard bench in powerlifting competition for women, I literally don't understand why it's so bad. My son, he weighs 45 pounds. His max bench is like 33. I'm legit seeing some women in competition who are doing something like 50 pounds. And I just don't understand it.
Now, obviously, Anne really respects women and made a point of saying that Anne competes in powerlifting as a woman because she loves women. So I just want everybody to understand that. So Anne, who was born a biological male, has been competing for like 3 years now, shattering records left and right, competing as a woman because Anne cares about women.
That's why she's doing it, she said.
But you know what? It's terrible to have a stellar athlete like that just standing alone. I mean, if there's no competition, why bother, right? Do we really want to even watch the sport anymore if there's no actual competition? It's just, the same person over and over and over. It's like, it's like Tom Brady. People are kind of getting bored of Tom. It's like, Tom, geez, can somebody else get a Super Bowl ring? What's up with this? So fortunately, somebody stood in. His name is Avi Silverberg, and you cover him. Avi is, he is the coach of the men's powerlifting team in Canada. Is that correct, Nate?
Yeah, he's the coach of the. So allegedly, he's the coach of both the men's and the women's powerlifting.
Oh, okay. All of powerlifting. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. And apparently, well, Avi, he seemed to feel differently about the situation, and I think he saw, especially being a coach, that it makes complete sense that he wants there to be some actual good competition in the sport. So what are the rules with the Canadian powerlifting, Nate? I know you looked them up.
So the rules is that before they wanted, they were trying to figure out how to allow transgendered people to compete in both men's and women's sporting events. So it was like, is it genetics, is it whatever, right? So what they said is, okay, we want to be as inclusive as possible. This is Canada, the liberal lion of Canada. So what we're going to do is just allow, if you come to a competition, we're going to trust you. So if you tell us you're a biological man, but you identify as a woman, you compete with the women. If you tell us you're a woman who wants to compete with the men, you compete with the men. But there was a problem because it didn't matter if you had any hormone therapy or anything, or if you reduce levels of testosterone, which is things like the Olympics require, right? You have to, be testosterone blocks for like 2 years before you can compete. But they say none of that. You just tell us. So what happens is that, so this transgendered athlete like broke all the records, like had the record in Alberta, broke all the records. Right?
And I know it's shocking. It's shocking to everybody.
Yes, broke all the
no
records.
way.
And like you were saying, complaining that women are so bad in bench press. So what happens is that there's also prize money when you win. So guys aren't stupid. They're like, well, hold on. The bench pressing record here is 200 pounds. I could do 225 in my sleep. So let me go get that prize money. So this guy thought it was so dumb that they did that. So you know what he did? Go ahead. So he goes to the competition. They say, where do you want to compete? He says, I identify as a woman. And they said, okay. So now you get to compete with the women. So now
let's see how he's
going to bench. Now he's benching world record weight. This is he's going for the world record. This is not just the record here. This is the world record
for women.
Yes, for women, and he's walking off the street.
Now, hold on. The current world record for women before this gentleman was what, like
275?
275 pounds. That's kilograms on the bottom for those who are more advanced in math. And so let's go. We got to cheer him on. Here he is. I mean, she.
Yeah,
she.
I'm sorry. Come on,
okay.
Man.
I'm sorry, Avi. I'm sorry. I misgendered you. Here she is. And she's coming up. Let's check it out. Come on.
Right.
Come on, Avi.
Pause it real quick. Pause it real quick.
Over there on the left.
Now, you can see, now you'll see later the transgendered woman who has the record is here watching. So this is even more painful because she's watching this lift. So here we go. Going for the record.
Left with the glasses, looking.
No,
down?
she's all the way in the back with her arms crossed behind, like all the way in the back over there. There she goes. Yeah.
On the
you'll see her when she walks up closer.
Oh, I can tell she's so obviously feminine. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I missed that. Okay, here we go. Avi, I'm counting on you. I'm rooting. Come on, Avi. Come on. All right. Let's go ahead. Come on up. Okay, here we go.
Now he's going for a world record, 370 pounds.
Now, and you can see he's very feminine. I mean, he's very clear. He identifies. There's no confusion whatsoever. So here we go. 370.
Almost 100 pounds over the record.
Boom! Holy cow, that's one strong woman.
That's the strongest woman in the world right there, person. That's the strongest woman in the world. Woo! Broke the record. Now the person walking, now you see the person walking toward the bench now? That's the former champion right there. That one right there. Yeah, that's the former champion.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ann.
Why are you laughing at this?
No, poor Ann. I mean, you know what though? Ann should be relieved. Didn't she say there was a problem with, bench pressing with women, that they weren't really working on their chest or anything? It seems like things have improved over time, and she should take solace in that fact.
Every rule was met. That's what's so awesome about it.
Every rule,
no cheating.
Was met. Absolutely no cheating. Just went, and that's all you had to do is say that. But he wanted to make the point. He wanted to make the point that it's unfair for for biological men who've gone through puberty to compete against biological women. Right? It's a bridge too far, and just ignoring it and allowing anybody to go compete like this is essentially a bastardization of the sport, right? Because we know that there are issues here. So he went and now they, even though he's now set the world record, they've put it in abeyance until they can figure out what they want to do. Because is this really a world record now, or local record, or how are we going to figure it out?
I don't know. Putting in abeyance seems kind of transphobic to me.
I think so. I agree, Joe. I totally agree. And I personally obviously love this because it is pointing out the ridiculous nature of the rule. And maybe that's the only way to get anything changed. Because the irony is, of course, people are crying. And Nate, what are they crying?
Well, they're saying that this was, again, they're saying that this is unfair. That
it's not fair.
Yes, they're saying that this person should have been eliminated and not allowed because of the way they look and that this person was doing this with malice intent and didn't really care about the sport. So
No, it gets even better than that. And I don't have the video immediately pulled up, but on Instagram, Anne addresses it and points out that, well, okay, technically, biology wise, maybe it could be said about me. But when I go compete in these events, well, people want to see me because I'm friendly and I help people out. And it's really about being nice.
Nate
So-
got his work in. He's done. He
Yeah,
got his
apparently.
work in for the day. He's done.
He does. He has.
I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, Southern-in-law. I don't
Oh,
know
sorry.
your
This is
first name.
Steve.
Steve. Joe.
Hi, Joe. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you too. What area of law do you practice?
Well, I'm kind of semi-retired now, but I was a civil litigator and still do that a little bit. A lot of corporate law, stuff like that.
Which jurisdiction?
North Carolina.
Oh, cool. Cool. Well, nice to meet you.
All right.
So Nate brought this story up, and until he comes back, and
system restart.
I want to go on record as saying, the whole thing that if I identified as a woman, they would kick my butt.
oh, for sure.
They would.
All of them.
You would not be able to tell the difference if I was competing against women or men. I'll tell you right. They would just destroy me in any sport that I tried competing in. But that doesn't mean that anyone who's like, I don't know, maybe under 50 might do better. And yeah, it's a reminder that there's two genders and you can't change from one to the other. Doesn't matter what kind of Dr. Frankenstein measures you play. But it's a little bit of a hot take. I know people can't really handle that.
No, well, Joe, I mean, to one up you, a high school female team would probably beat me. I mean, I'm badly out of shape, so and don't train for powerlifting in any way. But I just completely love that story. Well, while we wait for Nate to get back, I heard a rumor that something happened recently. Well, there's two things actually. There was a verdict that came down yesterday. Have you guys been covering the surprise Gwyneth Paltrow case? I mean, I didn't know that thing was even happening. And then all of a sudden,
I watched it toward the end and did some on Legal Bias channel with it as she was streaming it. Not because the case was that interesting, because it's just who hit who kind of a thing. But the lawyering and the case handling was so bizarre. A lot of things hadn't seen before, and it became interesting because of that. But not surprised by the verdict at all.
Did you cover it at all, Joe, or no?
I'm sorry. I just gotta cover.
Gwyneth Paltrow.
Oh, the Gwyneth Paltrow. Yeah, I covered some of that. I can give you a breakdown on my take on it if you like. Which
of course.
I walked into that trial, and from the early parts of the testimony, starting from the first witness, which was Craig Ramon. Craig Ramon, right? I was thinking the Ramones with him. Yeah, so Craig Ramon, he described himself as being friendly, but not really friends with the plaintiff. He was the only witness, and he said it was very clear that Gwyneth basically crashed into him. And the whole dispute is who crashed into who. And once you get there, you basically know win or lose. I mean, because and then there's a level of damages depending on how much you believe of his brain damages. But essentially, the liability was really at issue here because there were so few witnesses, and the claims of plaintiff and defendant were completely in opposition to each other as to who crashed into the other one, which you wouldn't think normally would be such a difficult thing to assess. They brought up Gwyneth Paltrow to the stand before. This was an interesting strategy by the plaintiff, is that they called Gwyneth as a witness prior to bringing up the plaintiff to tell his side of the story. And I was not impressed with the litigation skills of the woman who put Gwyneth on direct, which they refer to as being cross. And I guess technically
adverse cross.
Well, when you have an adverse witness and you bring them up to the stand, you have the right to treat them as they're assumed to be a hostile witness. So you have the right to ask them leading questions normally. I mean, that's the way at least would be here in New York. I can't really speak to Utah, but that's the way. But interestingly enough, they referred to her own attorneys questioning her as if it was direct, this was an interesting little just legal wrinkle, which is when Gwyneth was on the stand, she's put on the stand by the defense team, by the plaintiff's team, right? So the defendant is put on by the plaintiff's team. So it's normal that the plaintiff's team could treat her like a hostile witness and ask her leading questions. You cannot ask leading questions of your own client, but you can, or if someone you put up on direct, you're allowed to ask people, you're allowed to ask leading questions to someone you put up on cross, or someone who's deemed to be adverse. Someone, if it's an adverse party, they are automatically assumed to be adverse. I'm giving you the layout for the way it works in New York. There is similar rules. I can't speak to North Carolina or Utah. There's similar rules across the board. So what we would say in New York is if the defense calls the plaintiff, if the plaintiff calls the defendant, you can ask them leading questions. And because the plaintiff called them, then Gwyneth's own counsel would be allowed to ask her leading questions as well. I thought it was very interesting, actually, that when the defense was cross-examining their own plaintiff and giving her side of the story, and there were objections leading that the judge sustained, that they were not permitted to lead her, even though technically she was on cross-examination. But anyway, that's a little bit of the technical legality, which was an interesting wrinkle that was different in Utah than what we would see here in New York. But what I'll tell you is when she got up there, I had a lot of questions about her version of the story. It didn't things weren't adding up to me. She said that, you know, she sees two skis behind her, like coming between her legs, between her skis. There's two skis coming between her skis, and then she feels a man behind her, and she's asked by the attorney, "How do you know he's a man?" "I can hear him grunting, and I thought it was like a prank." And he's skiing, you know, and then I feel him pressing against me, and I was like, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if it's a prank or whatever. And then we fell, and I got up, and she admitted that she yelled at him and cursed him. And someone else came along who was like a friend of hers, or was one of the ski instructors, the people that were there with her, because it was her whole family and other ski instructors. And that he said he would take care of it. So that's why she left the scene without giving any personal information. And then she basically went off down the hill. And there was a lot of things that just didn't make sense to me. Just the way she was describing it. Normally, you would think when one skier hits another from behind, you can't. It's almost impossible unless they grab around them to maintain contact.
Sure, it is.
I don't know. To me, it
no,
seems weird.
I haven't seen, but just watching it, because there's a certain amount of momentum. I don't think she was talking about them hanging together for 5 minutes, but I mean, I'm just realistically, if you're sliding, you're both going down the hill, so you've got a basic momentum. Let's say that he's going faster than her, they collide. Would they immediately go down, or would they not possibly continue skiing? And he could be off balance, you know, not necessarily meaning anything like that, but kind of behind her with the ski in between, at least for, I don't know, 10 seconds, 5 seconds, you know, whatever, while the momentum takes them. I mean, I could visualize that in my head. I don't know what it would look like from behind, or, you know, her perspective. But then if you look down, you would possibly see a ski kind of coming up between.
I would think when they're both in motion like that, the physics would, I could be wrong about this, but I would think the physics would sort of like she would slow him and be pushed forward by him. Like, I would think there would be a separation that would happen after the initial contact. To hear him basically describe thrusting, which was, and she practically described like a Me Too moment.
Well, that part's kind of weird. The whole, okay, I feel this, but then I'm trying to step back and say, is it possible? And you know, again, you're moving. And a grunting, like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a Me Too thing. That's just crazy.
Right. But the way she described it, that she initially thought that perhaps it was some sort of Me Too type of thing that was happening there. And then plaintiff's counsel says, "Can you step down from the stand so we could try and reenact this? And would you mind doing that?" And I'm watching this trial, and I was like, yes, that's where you say, yes, I definitely wouldn't mind being involved in a recreation of what felt like a Me Too moment. Can you imagine all the video that would be circulating if she had gotten off the stand there and just reenacted this thing with this female attorney, and their basic, that would have been something we remember that for the rest of the time. I was like, no, she definitely does not want to do that. And her lawyers objected. And then they had some sort of issue. At one point, she's like, all right, well, can I reenact it with my client being the one to do it? And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, just as an attorney and someone who thinks of strategy, I was like, is that really what you want the jury to see? You want to see, this is what plaintiff's counsel was asking for, that we want to have permission to have the plaintiff stand behind the plaintiff's counsel, a woman.
Good Lord.
And just start basically having her mold them as models or actors in this Me Too moment, that this is what they want to show the jury. And I was just like, if I was defense counsel, I'd be like, yeah, I'll allow that. I'm fine with that.
Sure, go ahead, do that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. If you want to show him doing it, that would be appropriate. I'd be happy with that. But they objected to that as well. And the judge is like, yeah, we're not doing this. This is not something that is happening here. But anyway, I had questions about her story. Every time one of the attorneys got up there and said anything, I liked the other side more, because her
attorneys were awful. The one thing I saw, well, there was one dude with glasses, darker hair, glasses, looked like he had braces. I forgot his name, but that dude seemed to be fine, partly because I didn't notice him. He seemed to be on point, asked decent questions. But I'm sitting there watching these attorneys hating their guts and liking the expert witnesses. So I was just feeling sorry and I only saw like one day of it. It was Thursday or Wednesday. And I'm like, this guy Owens on the defense is just a smug prick. Have you ever
grating.
He is somebody, he came off to me as the guy who wants to be the smartest person in the room, no matter what. He always has some dumbass joke, or even his own expert witness. The guy goes up there and he lists off just a whole bunch of credentials. He's like, nerd. And it's like, oh, and people laugh. So then later on he goes, nerd. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Why are you doing? And he just, the witness was very likable and humble, but then Owens would open his mouth and I'd be like, so it was a problem. It's like, could we punish the lawyers and reward the witness? Because then behind Owens, the cougher, and that guy, it was like every time a little degree of stress came along, his cough rate increased. And I'm like, boy, that cough works out real well. And I will give Owens credit for one freaking line. If he wasn't such a dick all around, I would have loved this line. But they were talking about malingering, and Owens he was looking at the witness. He said, and he mixed up malingering with lingering, but it's still funny because so malingering is like when you have a cough that won't go away. And the other lawyer coughed. It was I'm like, there's a YouTube short. There's a short right there. Oh my god, it was a beautiful moment. But I hated them both.
Yeah, they're very, very easy to hate. And then when she took, and then by the way, the reason you may have felt that smugness is one of the things that he did, which was really bothering me. I would have objected to this over and over if I was plaintiff's counsel, is that when he's cross-examining, so he'd be like, well, would it surprise you if in fact you're saying that there was no one on the slope? Would it surprise, or that no one came over to you? Would it surprise you if a ski patrol actually came up to you and approached you? And he'd be like, I don't remember that. And he's like, well, we're going to hear testimony about that later today. Every time he would follow up with this follow-up to sort of give a preview to the jury as to testimony that would supposedly be elicited later. And to me, that was it's not asking a question. It's almost like, I'm telling the jury now that you're going to hear this testimony from this witness be refuted, and that I'm going to be presenting that. And I want so even right now, I don't want you to trust what they said, because I'm planting that seed that I'm going to refute that. That is him testifying from the podium. where he's basically trying to say that this testimony is coming. And that's a smug sort of thing where it's a way of basically approaching it as if like, well, I know best and I'm going to prove that you're wrong, even though there's no evidence that's been submitted yet. I found that very, very irritating personally. And if I was plaintiff's counsel, I would have objected to it every time, but he got away with it without a peep from plaintiff's counsel. And then
plaintiff's counsel had his own little trick that was going on, and that was his running objections. When he would say, when he say objection, and then such and such.
Speaking objections.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, but he just kept going and going and going, and that was kind of irritating.
Yes,
they both. Like I said, it was
that's testifying. Also, that's a form of trying to inappropriately testify to the jury. It's like you want the jury to hear all the reasons why something is not credible, and if the other side enables you to get away with it, you'll keep doing it. Because it's your chance to talk to the jury without facing them. So, when he got up on the stand, I had all sorts of problems with his testimony. When the plaintiff got on the stand, he's basically saying that he sort of, that he describes the whole accident and how he got hit from behind and certain things he's taking note of. And then like when he goes down and he's face down and he's unconscious, and sometimes he thought it was 30 seconds. Other times he thought it was like 10 minutes that he was face down and knocked out, which, okay, if you're knocked out, you're not going to know how long you're knocked out. But he's like, and then he apologized and said, I'm sorry. But supposedly the reason he said that is because he had these people, he had her boyfriend or someone else barking at him and yelling at him, what did you do? This is all your fault. And then he was trying to placate them because he was afraid. And he said, I'm sorry. And he's like, well, what happened next? He's like, well, then I'm sitting there trying to think, how am I going to get up? And what position were you at this time? I was still face down in the snow. And I'm sitting here saying, you just said that you said you're sorry. Like he said that he mouthed, I'm sorry 3 times and couldn't get the words out because his ribs were cracked. And I'm like, well, what position were you in when you're saying I'm sorry? Like none of this is making any sort of sense to me as to what everyone is describing here. I felt as if she did a poor job describing how they went down in a way that he was behind her and yet ended up being the one to fall underneath her, which I would think she would be able to describe that. Because he's the one who's most people agree she fell on top of, and how it is they cracked his ribs. And he's describing the story in a way that doesn't make sense either. And what I basically was left with is the burden of proof is on the plaintiff. And I am really at a 50-50 spot. I have no idea. One of them must be lying.
Tie goes to the defendant.
Tie goes to the defendant.
And the defendant only asked for $1 too, which I think helped the credibility as well. Like,
but that was a very smart dollar. It was a very smart dollar. No, it's different than getting nothing, because that $1
means legal fees.
Yes, it means she's able to go after hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. So, which no doubt she has many hundreds of. She has at least 200,000 in legal fees.
But it also optic wise looks very solid too, because she's saying, I just want this to go away. I didn't do it. I'm going for $1 because he's lying. Yeah. And I think that's strong. And Steve, did you see the final? It was direct, I guess, technically, but he was adverse witness of Sanderson, again by Owens, who I can't stand, but Owens seemed to do a pretty good job in that last 30 minutes. I don't know. Did you happen to see that?
I only saw part of that, so not most of it, but a little bit of it. I mean, like Joe said, I didn't find Owens impressive in the questioning he was doing generally, or anything really until closing, which I thought he did a fairly decent job, although he tried to stretch it at the end. So he was to me a reason to watch the trial, just to be like, what in the hell is this guy doing? Until the end, where I think he redeemed himself to some degree there, because the plaintiff's counsel closing they kept talking about how much they hated their client, didn't like him because he was such a bad personality now, and maybe that flowed through in the closing because it didn't seem like they had a lot of effort in it.
I want to ask you a question, Steve, because you do civil litigation. One of the things that really bothered me, only in the sense that I felt fairness was really a little bit affected by the fact that the first witness on behalf of the defense was able to put up a demonstrative aid, which is that they had a CGI that's basically a cartoon that was created that was supposed to show what this guy is testifying about. And it shows like Paltrow's family skiing on the left side of the slope, and then they're showing Paltrow going down on the right side of the slope, and him going from one side of the slope to the other side of the slope, and they end up not showing the crash part. I don't think they were permitted to show the actual collision part, but the positioning there shows him way behind and catching up. When and it looks like they're skiing on the slopes. I mean, it's really good. It's really good, expensive CGI. And I was very bothered by this because I was like, look, I think she should win because of, the reasons I stated earlier. But this is something that when you're the jury and they're all trying to picture in their mind what happened, and you're calling this a demonstrative aid, that starts becoming fact, even though it's not even admitted as evidence, and it's bolstering one witness's testimony. And I was like, this is so prejudicial. This is so wrong because they're all trying to picture in their mind, and all you're going to see in your head is that CGI, which looks really lifelike, of them like basically going down the mountain and him starting from way behind and catching up to her, which clearly there's no way she could have crashed into him if he's all the way behind. And it just was so powerful that for the judge to allow that to come in as a demonstrative aid when really it's so powerful in bolstering the testimony of one witness. I was like, this just seems like they had more money to spend on the CGI, and that's why now they're going to win, because you can't get that image out of your head. You cannot. In fact, a lot of people, when I was on with Megan Fox for this, and I was like, yeah, and I was complaining how unfair and prejudicial this was. She's like, no, they told the jury this is not real. This is not real. And then she DM'd me 2 days later, and she's like, I had someone who just was telling me that obviously she's innocent because they saw a video from the thing there. And I'm like, you see, that's what happened. That's how a normal person thinks. That's how any human thinks. I'm not even judging the jury improperly. Every human's trying to picture it in their mind, and the easiest picture is the one that's shown to you. So what are your thoughts on that, Steve, as far as whether that's fair or prejudicial? That's what I really wanted to ask another civil litigator or something.
Well, I do think it's prejudicial. And of course, if you're her lawyer, you want everything you've got to be as prejudicial as possible to the other side. And people love, if they can afford it, to have animation and get it in there, all for the reasons that you just said. Now, in this case, what was interesting to me was a point you made, which is how realistic they made it. Mm-hmm. Because some animations you see are kind of like stick figures moving around, like in the Murdaugh case, the silver ninjas and all that. And so you are reminded more that this is just somebody's idea of this. But I saw somebody in the chat when I was talking about the case saying, hey, is this an actual video of this going on? They made a very realistic video. So I don't know if they had, limine action before the trial started to try and exclude this or not. But they certainly should have tried to the degree they could, because it was whoever did the video for them, whatever group consulting group that was, did a great job with the graphics, because I saw that at the end of the trial. And of course, they kept playing them in the closing. And you just see it over and over again, this dude coming and hitting her from behind. And like you said, it's there. So
you mean that somebody for the plaintiff, Gwyneth Paltrow, who was in a Marvel, the defendant, Gwyneth Paltrow, who's in a Marvel movie, Iron Man, I believe Avengers, and might be connected to some of the top visual effects animation CGI people in the entire world.
Yeah, because this wasn't like a cartoon or like a red dot and a blue dot. These were people like moving, like they're skiing while they come in. And
it was good. It was good.
If you zoomed in, you'd probably see Gwyneth mouthing, "Me too." I don't think they dropped anything out of what they were doing.
Oh God!
And I was like, "This is so stupid. They could paint like a swastika on Sanderson if they want. Why not? Like while you're at it, we're not saying
it was over the top. It was great animation, absolutely.
Yeah,
but in fairness, the last half hour that Owens did, and I didn't see all of it, but I saw enough of it to go, oof, that's horrible. They just said, okay, so after the accident, you went to Monte Picchu, you went to Norway like 4 times. The guy is suing, saying, my life is ruined. I will never experience and have not experienced my life. It's, my living has been degraded. Da, da, da. The guy was a world traveler, and they're pulling up like every Facebook image of him, like, oh, here he's in Monte Picchu with his camelback and just smiling all over the planet. And I can't help but think that even though the jury's sitting there saying, well, I wish my life was ruined that way.
Yeah.
I mean, it was devastating. I feel that was absolutely devastating. it went beautifully with the whole thing of no, the accident didn't do anything. Yeah, he might have things going on, but they were already going on, and it's just natural progression or regression.
I was sharing my audience last night. It's a 9-minute video from Court TV where they have this guy on who's some tech expert who managed to get access to the link that no one could figure out a way to get access to. I can share with you if you want.
Yeah, bring it up later.
Yeah, and I'll give you the link.
While you do that, I'm going to switch gears really quickly because Nate has been uncharacteristically quiet. It's like Nate, are you there? Okay.
Oh no, I was listening to Joe explain it because only time I get to get in is when I disagree with Joe, but I agree with everything he was saying.
Oh Jesus!
There was nothing to say.
Wow! Oh my God! I just saw another one of those horsemen come by here.
Dear diary,
here comes the apocalypse.
You're just like, okay, yeah, he's right.
But by the way, Joe, I sent you a message in the private chat.
I saw it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure you saw that for maybe one. I don't know what's going on. But there is another minor little thing in the world of law that has come down as of yesterday, that apparently a grand jury has indicted a ham sandwich. I mean, former president. So now Nate, I mean, being on top of the game, has shown that the litigator, or he's got a little video that we're going to be playing here in a second, showing that the litigator involved, Alvin Bragg, is definitely not political. He's a very sober, thoughtful jurist. He's very concerned about fairness, and I guess sober would be the right term, Nate. Wouldn't you say? Just, really calm, just doesn't want to go after anybody, has no personal thoughts or feelings. I mean, if Atticus Finch was resurrected today, he'd be Alvin Bragg. Would that be fair?
Well, don't put words in my mouth. What I want to say about Alvin Bragg is that I'm always concerned if you're a prosecutor or an attorney general and you run on a platform of we're going to get this guy. That concerns me because then when you get inside there, then if you get that guy, it's like, well, are you looking for a crime just for the guy, or have you looked at the evidence? So, when you and that's what happened with Letitia James, who's the AG in New York, and that seems to be happening with the attorney. Now, one thing I will also want to say too is that it's interesting how it's now like MSNBC is throwing identity politics into it all of a sudden, right? It's if you think this guy is you're racist, if you're a racist, a black DA, so everybody's racist. So it's so
you're a racist, Nate.
So I'm racist because so what this clip is you're about to see is Alvin Bragg. Now he was doing his look because he's running for Manhattan DA. So this is him explaining to the people, how he feels about Trump and about the upcoming if he wins, what he's going to do. So play that clip. It's a very important. Listen to both the question and the answer because they're just as important. The question is important and the answer is important.
All right.
Vic Donald Trump.
Oh, good. Roll it back. Press just a couple of seconds.
Are they going to convict Donald Trump?
Now hold on.
That is
What?
This is 2 years ago, people. This is not recently. This is 2 years ago. So now scroll it back. I'm just hit back to 10 seconds when you get the full question. Yeah, there it is. Go ahead. Play it now. 2 years ago when he was running for DA.
Are they going to convict Donald Trump?
Look, that is the number one issue. We know he's investigating. And what I'll say is I was the first to announce against Cy Vance. I too have a lot of issues, which is why I decided to run. I'm the candidate in the race who has the experience with Donald Trump. I was the chief deputy in the attorney general's office. We sued the Trump administration over 100 times for the Muslim travel ban, for family separation at the border, for shenanigans with the census. So I know how to litigate with him. I also led the team that did the Trump Foundation case. So I'm ready to go wherever the facts take me and to inherit that case. And I think, I'd be hard to argue with the fact that that'd be the most important, most high-profile case. And I've seen him up front and seen the lawlessness that he can do.
And you believe it should happen?
I believe we have to hold him accountable. I haven't seen all the facts beyond the public, but I've litigated with him, and so I'm prepared to go where the facts take me once I see them and hold him accountable.
Where do you fit in as the Manhattan District Attorney versus on the federal level, the attorney for the Southern District of New York? How do you guys who does what?
Exactly. So, I was in that office. I was in the public corruption unit in the Southern District of New York. So there is sometimes working together. Oftentimes the same case could be brought as a federal matter or as a state matter. I'll give you an example. I did the case that led to the conviction of Malcolm Smith, who was the Senate Majority Leader for bribery. That could have been a state case. It's just that we were basically the Southern District. We've been in the lead. We were using our resources and focusing on people using power and abusing power. And if I were Manhattan District Attorney, I would be focusing on that in a way that office has not before.
So, Alvin, you said leading you where the facts may lead you with regard to dealing with Donald Trump.
The facts will lead me towards going after him.
From what you know today, and I know you're being careful with your words because you're running for office, so I respect that. But I know as a voter and a taxpayer, all I know is some of the things that I've seen would have put me in jail. So how is it not going to put someone at his level in jail? Now, I know the answer is he's an old white man and he's got a lot of money and he was just coming out of the office of president. But that doesn't sit well with me as a citizen of the United States and a resident of, this area.
No doubt. You're right. So I'm being careful, not so much of running for office, but because every case does have to be judged on its facts, and I don't know all the facts, right? And so I've been doing this for 20 plus years, so I want to be fair. But with that said, there is a lot that's out there publicly. I look at what the Attorney General is looking at as a civil case, which could become a criminal case at the Manhattan DA's office, where on the one hand, he's saying, hey, look, this piece of land is worth $1 when I want to go pay taxes, taxes on it. But when I want to go get a loan, all of a sudden it's worth $1 million, right? That's
public, but that's public information that he did that.
And so what I'm saying, that's why I'm focusing on that. That kind of conduct right there could definitely be the basis for a case. I've done a mortgage fraud case. I've gone to trial. I've done a tax fraud case. That kind of conduct right there is deeply troubling. And that's what I'm thinking about when I say, holding him accountable. So yeah, you are right. We got two standards of justice. Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, being a rich old white man has allowed you to evade accountability in Manhattan. That includes Trump and his children.
I agree.
They were engaged in fraud in a Soho real estate deal. His children. So you're right.
Now, the problem here is that he's he's telling you where he wants to go, right? There's no doubt that this guy wants to convict Trump, right? And even if you look at some of his campaign ads, it's kind of the same thing. And if you listen to more of the interview, he goes on to continue to say like, hey, these are some things I want to do. Like you said earlier, I'm the guy who's been going after him for all this time.
100 times.
I'm going to continue to go after him. So my whole thing is that in a little later in his interview, he's going to say that he wants to be even more careful because he doesn't want Trump to put a motion to give him from recuse himself because he already has these biases. But now, if I'm the DA and I know I have interviews like this out there, there's no way I'm not going to recuse myself from this case because the first thing somebody's going to do is replay this and say, you were after the guy and his kids. You're essentially saying that for the last 20 minutes, right? I'm after the guy for his kid. I've been doing this. Elect me. So
100 lawsuits. 100 lawsuits.
It's so I feel if this guy has the goods, he may have it. We don't know the evidence. I don't know anything. But when hearing stuff like this makes you think that, this could be a political prosecution. But I don't know. How do you guys feel?
If he has the evidence, then anyone in his office could do this case. Why does he have to do it? That's obviously personal. So yeah, you're right. Why doesn't he recuse himself?
There's a glory to it also. I mean, there's
okay, but you promised that you're going to do it. Congratulations. Now you're going to do it. Now we know what you're about.
Promising you're going to do it is tough, though. Promising we're going to hold him accountable. We're going to do this. Remember, this guy doesn't know the evidence they have. Doesn't know anything, right? He's on the outside, and he's saying, "We're going to hold them accountable." Well, that sounds to me that you're going inside there on a mission, right? Because justice is supposed to be blind. Sounds like you're going in for a mission, and his mission is get Trump, and he's got him. He's got him. But again, now I got to see what the evidence is, and that's what the only problem is. It taints the evidence so bad when you go on like that. And the same thing for the New York AG. She says the same thing. I'm going to get Trump, and then she goes and sues him. It makes me seem like you're going after a political opponent.
Well, I also worry about this. How are things going for Michael Avenatti? The guy that CNN wanted to be president.
Well, he's in jail. Isn't he in jail for
that's my point.
Yeah.
And I do wonder because if you hate somebody that badly and you want to get them so badly and you want the glory so badly, are you crossing every T? Are you dotting every I? Are you at any point putting your thumb on the scale, changing any documents, overlooking anything exculpatory, doing any kind of Brady violation? I do kind of wonder, especially with a track record of over 100, that stands out to me. I don't know. You're all litigators. Steve, you're a civil litigator. Have you ever gone after someone 100 plus times?
No, I used to represent companies that were sued like that, though. But look at the Alec Baldwin case. Those DAs have all resigned out of that case because they're running their mouths and stuff like that. I mean, what Nate says is just a great point, that running for office and focusing on one person that you're going to get. I don't know if Trump committed a crime or not. How would I know? I don't know what their file is.
How would Alvin know? Because he was saying this before the fact.
That's right. and it's just not good, because I'm not even sure what the thing that they're indicting him on is. That something even really important? Really? I mean, I don't even know how it's a crime.
But business. It's so the fact of the matter is, if I put something wrong on my business record, like for instance, in this case, the payment allegedly, because we don't really know anything, but this is what the news media is saying, allegedly, because they put down on their business records that the payment to Stormy Daniels was
it's the deep state interfering with Nate.
If you want to make that, it's like
we couldn't hear
right?
Nate.
If you want to make it a felony,
Nate, you faded out. You lost connection when you started explaining what the crime was.
Sorry.
So repeat, please.
All right.
So
the allegations is he's made multiple payments to women over the years, and those payments were documented on their business records as legal expenses. So for each one of those times that he said there was a legal expense, they're saying that that's falsification of business records. Now, generally, those are all misdemeanors.
But did Trump say it was a legal expense, or did Cohen say it was a legal expense?
Well, they're saying that the people that Trump knew, because the thing is, they have to show that Trump knew it was being documented incorrectly. So to do that, they got Cohen, they got a whole bunch of other people, like his other person. So they allegedly, again, I don't know if these are facts or in it, but the key point is that those are all just misdemeanors, and usually those are just slaps on the wrist. But you can make it up to a felony if you can show that they were in furtherance of like a campaign, like that they were really campaign contributions. Right, you were trying to help your campaign, and that's where you get the indictment from. So again,
is this the same thing? That Hillary Clinton just pled out her misdemeanor or paid her fine for her misdemeanor or whatever for the Steele dossier, which got tied back to her.
Yes, this is exactly the same thing with the Steele dossier. So for those of you who don't know, so the Steele dossier, when they paid for that was to help the campaign. That was the dirt for Trump. So they documented on their business records as a legal expense, and then they had to then pay the fine and everything to say, hey, this wasn't a legal expense. This was actually a campaign.
So this is confession through projection. I mean, if you think about it, because I bet you Alvin Bragg voted for Clinton. Just a guess, but I have a funny feeling he did. So we know the methodology of something, and we're saying, oh, well, this is what we do. They probably did that, so let's go after them because it's illegal if they do it. That's it. Am I misreading? I'm not the lawyer.
It was illegal when both of them did it. It's just now, because again, it's. I always like to say this. It's not about if two people do something. It's about how they are both treated if they get caught. And one person we're indicting them for the crimes, and the other one we allowed them to pay the fine. So that I think may be the difference here. You know what I mean?
There's even more to it than that. There's a lot more to it than that. I mean, and I should pause and just restate what both attorneys here have implied, which is we do not know yet for sure what the charge is based on. None of us have. It's a sealed indictment, and we're all speculating based on reports that we heard 2 weeks ago that he was supposedly going to get indicted for, and assuming that that's what he was ultimately indicted for rather than other facts, which might be completely unrelated to Stormy Daniels for all we know, right? So that we're all speculating here, and it's far more difficult to assess that, when we don't know. But assuming it is the Stormy Daniels, what people were saying 2 weeks ago is, well, as Nate indicated, that misdemeanor can become a felony. The key to raising it from a misdemeanor to a felony is if you commit that misdemeanor in furtherance of a different felony. So you have to have a predicate felony, a different separate felony, that this misdemeanor action is designed to further that felony.
So it's a chain. You have to have a whole chain of events. Essentially, it's not one thing.
No, it can be. It can, in theory, be one event. But it's like here's the way I tried to explain this to my audience last night, which is that, like, let's say someone wants to commit insurance fraud. So that itself is a felony. Now, if you have to file those records with the state or something like that, so the one felony is committing the fraud, the other is the action of filing documents. So now, because it's trying to commit the fraud part, which is its own felony, you get a second felony, which is the filing of documents, rises up from being a misdemeanor into being a felony. And that's the normal way that something like that would be applied, that this law would be applied, that we can find a way to basically charge him a second time for in theory even just one action.
So what's the felony? Help me out with that. What is the
felony? Is the filing of a false document to help you.
Nate,
in other words,
this allegedly is a campaign finance violation.
Well,
that's where it gets kind of crazy.
It gets crazy. It gets crazy because in New York, it's, I don't think from what I've read, it's never been done before.
Yeah,
that this state misdemeanor can raise up to a state felony if it's in furtherance of a federal felony. Yeah. That's what makes it so that they're trying to stretch this law that normally is supposed to be something that only rises up, that's only ever been used before when it's been to further a state felony. Now they want to try to apply it to a federal felony. The reason they want to do this is because it's beyond the statute of limitations on the federal felony, and no one wanted to bring it on a federal level, because the only way that he could be guilty of this federal felony is if this contribution was something that was clearly being made exclusively for his campaign. If it's exclusively to benefit his campaign, then it can be considered theoretically, even though it's a weird way to consider it, that it could theoretically be considered a campaign donation. But if it's hush money, which is what everyone speculates that it was, so that she doesn't blab to the press that, Donald Trump did all these things with me and engaged in all these improper, these different acts with me. So, and you want to go into his mind. Why would you pay her off for that? Well, it could be because of his campaign, that he doesn't want to hurt his campaign. It also could be because he doesn't want his wife to find out. It also could be he doesn't want in the business world that his relationship, that his reputation when he's appearing on The Apprentice, that he's going to be harmed and people will look down on him. There could be 1,000 different reasons aside from him running for office that he can be making this payment to keep her quiet. And you're allowed to pay someone to keep them quiet. There's no crime in that. Everyone assumes that that's sort of blackmail, something like that. There's no crime in paying someone to keep quiet. Quite the contrary. NDA, that's exactly what an NDA is.
That's
and people
NDA,
sign NDAs all the time. Everyone knows that that's perfectly legal.
Matter of fact, everybody in here has probably signed an NDA at one point in their career.
Or drafted them.
Yeah.
Right?
I have a dumb question, and this is really from the novice angle. If you pay your lawyer to do things for you,
okay,
and I'm going to try to say illegal, whatever. But if you just say, hey, handle these bills, negotiate this contract, make sure that these are paid in time, make sure this is that. Do all of those things I just described fall under legal expenses?
Well, it's a weird little thing, right? So legal expenses technically are paying your attorney to do things, to do certain things. Here you're talking about paying an attorney to pay off someone else. So they're treating it like a pass-through. I think the argument, the two main arguments here, if everything that we've been hearing about the case is accurate, because again, I want to make it very clear, we don't know if these are the facts, but if everything that we've been hearing is accurate, there are two things. Number one, Trump has a history of paying women off and paying people off to keep these things quiet. He's done it for years, right? That was the whole safe at the thing, right?
Or had it done, because didn't David Pecker
Yes,
pay
Pecker.
women off and people like that? But that's not Trump. Like if
But
I come
no.
along and say, Nate, your shekels out of your pants, as Dave would say, and what's going on? Don't worry, Nate, I got your back.
Yeah.
No,
No,
but paid off. Is that you paying them off?
But let me finish. It's so the argument here from the DA would be, okay, he's paid these two women off at this particular moment in time because he was running for president, and those payments are obviously to help his campaign, right?
Is it because though?
Trump,
Yeah, like you just said, you got to cover
yes,
that.
but then Trump's argument in response to that is, I've been paying women off for 20 years. This is what the David Pecker thing. So the question to the jury now, the fact finder would be, were these payments just something to help the campaign, or were these payments just in his normal course of business? Hey, he's been doing this for 20 years. So if the jury buys that this is just something that he's been doing with Michael Cohen, as you alluded to, then Trump doesn't have a problem. But if they say that no, these two particular payments or these three particular payments were specifically for the campaign, now you have a different issue. So I think Trump does have a really good defense in this particular point. But again, it really depends on how the jury, the facts that are laid out. And I think Alvin Bragg and his crew are going to say these payments were made for the campaign.
And welcome, Jeff. Perfect timing. I know that you want to be here we're talking about, and I meant Schmeckel, folks, not shekel, but when we're talking about Schmeckel in the pants, Jeff from Legal Vice is exactly who we want.
Actually, you got to pay the shekels to get the schmeckles.
Exactly.
I was wondering if I could pay Joe to stop talking so I can get in the stream. Jeez.
I'm
just kidding, Joe.
We're going to about run Joe off. I don't know if he's going to be on People's Pundit or not. So.
I reached out to be an hour late. That's what happens when you get like 3 ADHD people in a stream and you try to keep it under 2 hours. It goes 4.
Ouch. So, Jeff, just to catch you up, have you been following what is going on with Trump or whatever? We were just playing a video that Nate found of Alvin Bragg, well-named, bragging that he was essentially going to go after Trump and that he has sued him over 100 times from 2 years ago.
Well, see, and I was just talking about this on my stream. They're opening a Pandora's box by doing this. If you look at the impeachments, Nixon there was like Nixon, and then like a billion years ago, you had to go back to get the previous person who was impeached. But now every single person, if they haven't had the impeachment process started against them, they've been threatened with it and they've been looking for ways to get to it. Now what you're going to see is every president from here on out, the other party is going to go after them and try to bring criminal charges against them. Because I don't care who you are or what you're doing. If you have risen to the highest levels of power in the United States, you've done some shady stuff to get there.
Yeah, sure. Amen.
Nobody has clean hands when you're spending $40 billion to get a job that pays you $400,000 a year.
Good point, Derna. Technically, Nixon was never impeached. He resigned as part of the deal to prevent him from being impeached. They had the votes to impeach him, though. And also the Senate, I think they had enough that he probably would have been convicted.
And Nixon wasn't prosecuted because he was pardoned by Ford. He was premature.
And you have this thing in Korea where I am, where literally virtually every single president since the end of the Korean War has ended up in jail.
Damn.
Except for one guy who they were looking into him and then he jumped off a cliff and then he became a hero. And the last president hasn't been out of office long enough for them to unearth it. But
find it.
Every president in modern history has been in jail because the other guys put them there. And this is what you're going to do if the Republicans have the balls to step up and act the way that they are being acted against.
It sounds like Illinois governors. Aren't
Just
they all
a little,
one after
yeah.
another in prison?
Yeah, yeah,
or
oh my
Louisiana, or what is it? They don't expect corruption; they demand it.
Yeah, I think it's a foolish move to do this because you are just opening Pandora's box.
Yeah, I think I honestly think even if you want to do it, you couldn't do it with Bragg. Bragg, he has to. He should have recused himself because you just open it up to this. You know, it's like, look what the guy said. Yeah, you know, you found me the man. Now he's finding me the crime. You know, and you know,
This is the best they can
taints the
do,
evidence,
Nate.
though.
Paying off
we
a
don't
woman
know
of
it. We don't-
negotiable affections is we're presuming that's
Yeah,
what
we
most
don't
of it
know
has to do. But this is the best they could come up with after literally 7 years of searching, at least 7 years of searching for all the heinous stuff he's allegedly done, and paying off a woman of negotiable affections is the best.
This is weak. This is weak. Next time I go to a strip club, I got to make sure I,
Yeah.
have my NDAs ready.
Yeah,
And I'm
tell
not
them
running
why
for
those
office.
dollar bills. Tell them why you're making it rain. Not to pay it off. Not to not tell anybody you were there.
Well, and it's worse than that. It's not the paying; it's the how he accounted for it, right?
Yeah, it's really how.
Yeah, I mean, so it's even weaker. It's even one step down from that.
The paying is legal. The paying was all legal.
Yeah.
Well, and okay, that's a problem too, because Cohen is a convicted felon now, and I reached back in. Cohen
Convicted of
floats.
perjury.
No,
right. Well, that's what I'm saying.
Hold on,
That's a very important thing.
Not
Yeah,
just
you're right.
perjury. Convicted of lying to Congress. Convicted of lying to the court. Convicted of lying. Like, this guy's convicted of lying to the IRS. Convicted of lying to the state authority. Like, this guy's lied to every authority he's been upon. Convicted of lying. He was lying to the bar association and been disbarred for lying. And this is the person you're going to say we're going to trust this guy's opinion.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. And this is the guy
tough.
who's sending
Tough sell.
the bill to Trump for him to pay legal expenses. Did Trump volunteer again? Assuming that we're talking about all this, which means that we're being more responsible than Bragg already in that interview. Assuming that is the case, that the liar is the one who's billing. So isn't that possibly exculpatory too? That the lie? How do I know? I get sent a bill, I pay the bill, move on. However he breaks it down. If that shouldn't be called a legal expense, I don't know. I just pay my damn bills. This is my lawyer. This is my expert who tells me this is what you're being billed for. I am paying that bill.
Would it shock you to hear a juror come back after voting to convict Donald Trump, came back and said, well, if you're hiring a lawyer who's such an obvious liar, you must be up to crooked things, and that's why I voted to convict? Would it shock you at all if
No.
it gets twisted that way? And what I'm saying is he's in New York. This is a jurisdiction which is very hostile to him. Very, very hostile. This is not as bad as being in Washington, D.C., but it's probably it's the second or third worst place for him to possibly be trying to defend himself from some empty charges. So, whether or not he's going to successfully defend, no matter what he says, or they're going to walk, he's a dead man walking on the conviction, because of the jury pool that he's going to have is going to be so thin as far as finding someone who's going to be looking. And let's face it, let's take a step back. If he was in a Republican jurisdiction, for sure that he almost definitely would walk. When you have someone who's this polarizing a figure, who's known and so deeply loved and deeply hated at the same time, most people are going to be guided by their heart and their feelings about the man rather than the actions that he's being charged with.
I'm going to push back on that.
Okay.
With one case.
Okay.
Rittenhouse was in a heavily Democratic county.
Was it?
And yes, it was heavily it was run by Democrats. Democratic prosecutor. That's why he was. And the jury was coming. I think it was like 60 or 70% Democrat. And those people, because that was a big thing. Oh my God, could he get a fair trial? And those people sat there, saw the evidence, and let that kid off. So
Got
even
another
though
one too, Nate.
even though I
Musk.
agree, Elon Musk too. So
San Francisco.
I agree. It may be more difficult, but I think good people will force the government to
I'll push back. I'll push back on your pushback.
Cool.
Yes. Here we go.
Rittenhouse
Let's move it around.
Rittenhouse had even though the yardstick is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, we know that's a joke. And Rittenhouse,
And Nancy Pelosi just confirmed that today, didn't she?
What happened today?
What'd she say?
Well, she made his comment that let the justice.
Yeah, now Donald Trump has the opportunity to prove himself innocent.
There you go.
Ooh.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah, it's not good.
but you know what? She's happens to be correct in that if you're a polarizing figure, he can prove himself. If he has video evidence, perhaps he can prove himself. Rittenhouse had tons of video evidence to prove himself innocent in a jurisdiction that you're saying was very hostile to him. So when you have video evidence showing what happened, trust me, if there was no video of the Rittenhouse story, he's cooked. He's cooked.
Yeah, I think Rittenhouse would have been in trouble. And let's not forget also the cop in Atlanta, Georgia, the one that shot the black guy with the taser.
Yeah.
They let him off too. But I don't know. Maybe I just think American people are good people by nature. And when if you make the argument I don't know. It's just hard for me to say because I've been shocked. I know, like for instance, in the Bronx County, I was a DA here in the Bronx. One of the things that always used to happen was it was very hard to get convictions. Bronx County was one of the hardest places to get convictions. And that's because even though it's heavily Democrat and with a Democratic DA, the people here are very suspect of police and very suspect of DAs and very suspect of the system. And that's the way it is in Harlem too, in the upper Manhattan area too. Those people, it's hard to get those people to convict people because they're very suspect. So even though I do agree troll is polarizing, I just have faith that people would hopefully look at the evidence, because if the evidence is BS and it's not there, I pray people can see through it. And again, I just might be just a hopeful person.
But by the way, this is Nancy Pelosi, who also liked to talk about the wrap-up smear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't know if you are familiar with that.
It's a very important concept that everyone should be familiar with.
Okay. Yeah. The wrap-up smear, essentially, just in case anybody hasn't heard of it, is you report a story enough times and you get it amplified enough times. By the time it comes out false, who cares? It's true. It goes all the way back to Goebbels in World War II. That's a fact.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. The way she described it was even more. You gotta go.
Yeah, I gotta run. Gotta put my kids in the. Like, I was supposed to be here till 1, and then my wife is here. Like, what's going on? It's 1:10. I'm like, I'm having such a good time.
Good seeing you, brother.
Well, thanks, Nate.
Good to see you again, Nate.
Great to see you guys too. We got to hang out a little bit more. But thanks again, guys, for having me. I'm sorry I took so much time on the mic, but let me go get my bench press on. I got to be the women's champ again.
Ooh.
Later, guys.
She actually described that wrap-up smear in a far more insidious way. She's like, you basically whisper something completely made up to a reporter, and then the reporters say, sources say, and the anonymous sources say, and then you as then after you read it there, you say, well, it's being reported that this, and then they come back and they basically say, well, Nancy Pelosi publicly said this now, and it's basically you work back and forth between each other to give validity to a story that's utter nonsense. That's the wrap.
You saw that in the indictment news today. A person said, they wouldn't even say if it was a man or a woman. They wouldn't even say an unidentified source. They just said a person. How do you check the veracity of a person said something?
Maybe they weren't assuming their gender. So.
Oh wait, don't worry, Reuters debunked it. I by the way, speaking of wrap-up smears, how do you like how fact checkers debunk everything that looks bad?
That's
and particularly in one direction. But what I love is if you actually read the debunking, it substantiates the initial claim.
Quite often.
And I mean that's just history too. I mean, when I hate to go back to Trump again, but like when Trump was in office, everybody's like, oh, it's 1984. It's like anybody that says that was 1984 has never read 1984. 1984 is exactly the opposite of what's happening, and that's the thing. It's the same thing. You say something, you put out the story, you repeat it enough, people believe it, and you just obfuscate everything, and that's what we're seeing.
Actually, I would disagree that 1984 was the opposite. It's just that you are looking from the wrong direction. It isn't the government, it's social media and YouTube. It's because 1984 is running, it's running extremely well and strong. Things like memory holing and I forget all the terms,
and
political correctness, which is
newspeak.
Newspeak, yes. Or just taking objective reality and stating that is something completely opposite, like what video we opened with the trans female who's obviously female setting the new world record in powerlifting.
Yeah. And of course the trans female who now shoots up a school, and we can blame it on toxic masculinity because she identifies as a he, him.
It is beautiful when you can frame or reframe everything so perfectly and don't have to deal with limitations like objective reality.
Well, and I'm old enough to remember when Pravda was supposed to be the propaganda, not all of the media in the U.S. That's how I was raised, and I look at it now, and boy, do I see the world differently than I did when I was young and idealistic.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. As an expat living in Korea, it offends me on almost a cellular level that the last place I can turn to look for news on what's happening in my country is news from my country. When I have to look at news from England, from Germany, from Sweden, from Norway to find out an objective view of what's happening in my country, that offends me.
All four of us are from a similar age demographic, where we grew up. Well, we grew up in an era where it was like America stood for everything virtuous and that you can possibly imagine. I mean, it literally, it was truth. It was truth, justice, the American way was what we believed in our heart of hearts, that, all Americans are good. Our government is good. Our police are good. We have a few bad apples, which unfortunately have to be taken care of. The justice system is perfect. And it became like almost like a comical type. There was a comical lampooning of it in that puppet movie that Matt Judge made. What was it? Team America, World Police, where they're like, America, FBI, like where that basically, but that really was how we grew up. Rocky IV. I mean, the whole premise of Rocky IV is America is fighting for good. All Americans are good, all Russians are evil, and there wasn't social media where you could see people outside of your own area, so all you knew was your own area, and we all genuinely grew up believing that America was amazingly wholesome, and I think probably all four of us have done it, like, practically complete 180 on that, where it's like we don't trust our government, we don't trust the police, we don't trust the justice system, we have issues about about things in that happen in November every 4 years, which I can't even say on YouTube. We don't trust the media anymore. We never thought the media was lying to us. We were like, no, that's where you turn on ABC News, NBC News, CBS News, you're going to get truth. There was no cable TV back when we were growing up, but that's where you're going to get truth and facts. And all of this has just been shattered over the last, somewhere between 7 to 20 years, where it's like it slowly starts eroding away until like now we're all sitting here and we're like, which I'm trying to figure out how our FBI is any better than the KGB. I mean, that's astonishing. When you consider,
I have a theory that I'll talk about after. Go for it. I believe that change happened during the first Gulf War, when it was Bernard Shaw hiding under a desk in a hotel. That was the shift when you went from the reporters reporting the news to the reporters becoming the news. And now it's the reporters creating the news. Edward R. Murrow, Morley Schaefer, Sam Donaldson, they reported the news. And I had a friend in high school who did some unfortunate things, and he said the worst day of his life was when he got a call and it said, "This is Sam Donaldson office. He would like to talk to you about an upcoming 60 Minutes." And he knew it was over.
They can't, by the way, they can't even do that anymore. I mean, Project Veritas is doing what 60 Minutes used to do decades ago and is now illegal or not practiced by almost every news organization in America. Now, remember, that was a long tradition, and it wasn't just 60 Minutes. The local news stations would do it. It'd be like, hey, let's go down to the local mechanic and get Joe to quote us a fake bill on a transmission that they never replace. And then they go to the other mechanic and they show, and they have the hidden cameras, and that's all completely gone. I know my show partner, Mark, talks about that all the time. That's a good point. Another one to what you were saying is very interesting. Think of all the actual footage there is of atrocities and things going on in Vietnam. Actual film. I mean, there's a ton of film of horrible things in Vietnam. And you now have a video camera that could do high def on every cell phone damn near sold. And there's not even a trickle coming out of the Ukraine. Anybody find that odd that, Vietnam, it's like they had to actually carry heavy ass movie cameras, etc. And there was footage after footage after footage on the news every single night. But where's the footage out of Ukraine when everybody has the ability?
That's a great question. It really is. And no one seems to want to answer this. Apparently, Ukraine has been winning this war and crushing Russia forever, and yet their cities are all demolished, which is, I'm not saying that fighting Russia is easy. I certainly don't envy any Ukrainian who's fighting against them. But as far as the narrative that's being sold, if there were all these victories, you would think there'd be some video footage of I don't know, a Russian tank exploding or something like that. We would see at least there would be one picture that we would have of, here's one guy there on the ground who's particularly adept at, instead of just hearing about Zelensky. So, yeah, I mean, to me, I think this whole Ukraine thing has been an utter fiction. And
the chat's bringing up there like Telegram, this person, that person. It's like, I've never heard of these people. I didn't know I had to go chase down Telegram. I mean, in Vietnam, it was on ABC News. It was on CBS. It was Cronkite was talking about it. It was there, and we can pull it. But here it's like, okay, so I have to go scrape every source out there to even find it, and I don't even know how to necessarily interpret it. I don't know what's going on. And back to what Jeff was saying, I totally agree. And you had actual reporters who were in there under fire doing it, and then by the time, not the first call for, but the second call for, we embedded reporters. We were like, hey, let's give you a tour of the battle.
Yeah.
And now we just don't even bother. I feel like they're just being sent the stories. Here, print this.
Did I say Sam Donaldson 60 Minutes? Sam Donaldson.
You did. He was ABC.
Did I? He was ABC.
They knew that, but don't worry about it.
To me, I remember Ted Koppel more than Walter Cronkite. Walter Cronkite was a little before. I don't know how you remember him because you're a week younger than me, Eric. But I remember Ted Koppel on Nightline every night. My mother used to watch at 11 o'clock.
But Vietnam was a little before his time. That's why I was saying Cronkite.
Yeah. And someone else pointed out in the chat there, by the way, that another area that we used to have complete faith and trust in was our military. That all our military engagements were noble and good. And I look back now in history, and I have a whole completely different vision of Vietnam and Korea and domino theory and everything there. Where I was like, they also told us that we're a democracy, and I grew up to realize that we've never, ever, ever in our history been a democracy.
They feared democracy. They feared it.
Right. And by the way, thank God that we're not a democracy. Democracies are not good. And anytime you hear someone screaming, this is not what a democracy should be, the response should be indeed and amen, and hopefully never in our lifetime, because democracies, our founding fathers in their brilliance and wisdom, and they recognize the the utter flaw in having a democracy, how that is doomed to fail. I mean, the whole convoluted electoral college they came up with, it's not like they didn't think of having one person, one vote, and they just were like, oh wow, that never crossed our minds. No, they flat out rejected it because they were like, that is a failure. That will fail, and that's going to have a tyranny by the majority over the minority every single time. And then that's why when you see these states that are basically saying we're going to ignore the will of our own voters, and they had that compact that was very, becomes popular to talk about every 4 years. Where you know what I'm talking about, Eric? Where they basically they have like 15 states which have signed on already, saying that we're going to follow the national vote instead of following what our own state citizens vote for, and that's going to determine which electors we send to Congress on January 6th, and that when they get enough, that basically will be converted to a real democracy of a national vote. And that is like the worst thing I've ever heard of any politician doing for their own constituents, because what they're basically committing, essentially, if you think about that entire thing, they're committing this. When will that kick in? The only time that will kick in is if your own state residents want this candidate, but because we have to follow the compact, we're going to follow what the national vote was. So we're going to ignore what our own state people want over here in Iowa or in Maryland or North Carolina, and we're just going to do what all these Californians want. Like, that is insanity. That is crazy. That is complete opposite of representing your own folks.
I have mixed feelings on that, because it's kind of put into place, because I do think the founding fathers were thinking in terms of a jury nullification, because they have talked and they have written about, I don't remember the exact letters, that they worry about a particular figure and the public being so overwhelmed with love or whatever of the figure and being tricked, and hopefully having people who are more informed able to counteract that. Now, obviously, that's a problem when you consider backroom deals and things like that. But I do think they had considered that, and that's part of why that ability is in there for the quote electors to say, no, you're going to elect that certain World War II yelling figure right now, an actual one, not a person we just label, which is the new trend. And I know that's where they're going with it, but they did put that consideration in there. So that's why I'm not going to fall one side or the other on that. You're
fixating on the actual process as opposed to the federalist element to the Electoral College, which is really what I'm focusing on. I'm talking about the power of each state working independently and from the nation as a whole. You're talking about the process of sending electors there versus, having your votes counted without going through that whole electoral process of having the electors, submit that slate of electors there. I'm not fixating on that, because that's not what that whole compact agreement is about. That the compact agreement is about subverting the will of the residents of your state to the national will as to who should be the next leader of the country. And that's what I'm saying is ignoring the federalist element, that each state acts independently of the other 49 states and not subjecting themselves to the will of some resident of a state that lives 1,000 miles away.
Which I agree with. I don't believe in tying anything to anything, but then I'm a weirdo, and you didn't used to vote directly for the Senate. That was an amendment. I mean, and that was deliberate. You were not supposed to be electing them. And by the way, in New Zealand, they removed half of their Congress just because of that. They were like, well, wait a minute, there's no point. If you're doing a direct election for both, what's the point? The reason why the senator is supposed to be 6 years is they're elected by the state. The state legislature has nothing to do with the people. The people elect the legislature elects the freaking, or put in the senator. So there's a lot of things that are going counter to that. And then on the flip side of that, even the whole balance of power question, I think, has been thrown on its head because of professional politicians. I personally think that the founding fathers saw acting as a Congress member to be a hardship. And that's why they only had a 2-year term, because they had to go deal with this crap, and it was taking them away from their home, their farms, their things that they had to do, their community, but they're doing it. They only have to do it for 2 years, and then they could come back home. They've done their duty. It was kind of like being drafted into the military in their mindset. And they thought that, obviously that will help the president from getting out of control, or these people from getting out of control, because everybody's going to want to fight for their own piece of the power. But they didn't realize that you could have a Congress who will become professional politicians and say, well, wait a minute, if I don't actually vote on anything and I let the administration kind of do what they want, I can criticize them if the war is bad. I can champion them if the war is good. They didn't ever think about people abdicating the responsibility. So I think that it's a weird study in history and human nature. And maybe I'm going way off end, but I find all this very fascinating.
An interesting side note is Senator Orrin Hatch from my state of Utah, one of the longest serving senators in the United States, in the history of the United States, won his position in the Senate by running on term limits.
Irony.
That's great.
His platform was term limits.
That's great. That's great. Rules for thee, but not for me. Did you bring up the Restrict Act yet? Did I come late and I missed the conversation about the Restrict Act? Because
no.
Are you familiar with what's going on with this bill, Eric?
Is that
this
the TikTok
bill? Well, yeah. I mean, it's not exactly. There's actually two bills relating to TikTok. One was a standalone by Josh Hawley. Another was the Restrict Act. Which
I haven't talked about it. No.
I mean, I don't know if you want to.
Oh no, I'm happy to talk about it, because I'm concerned about any of these quote laws, and a lot of people I know are saying colloquially that this is a Patriot Act Part 2, and I have a sneaking feeling that by the time the laws get completely drafted and all that, and they're supposed to be anti-TikTok, that the words "tick" and "talk" won't actually appear in the bill.
They're already not there.
Damn! It's kind of like "don't say gay," don't say TikTok. So okay, perfect. So fill us in.
So there was Bill 686, which requires a little bit more of a conversation, which was basically designed to stop TikTok. Supposedly, it's designed to stop people using to stop people using social media to the detriment of America. And he's funny. He knows exactly what your notification is. Get cocking up a minute. So there's Bill 686, which is highly controversial for good reason, because it's basically tyranny wrapped in a bow. But when supposedly it was supposed to stop TikTok from being able to operate here. In case you're unaware, TikTok is basically under the control of a Chinese company, which people say that by extension is under the control of President Xi.
Not untrue.
Right. So now there's a concern that there's 150 million users on TikTok. How many of them are American? I don't know, but they keep throwing out that number because that's a big fat number. I can't believe it's hard to imagine that half of America is on TikTok.
That number is lower than I expected, because there's 300 million on Twitter. I mean, TikTok is supposed to be the rage. Wait, what? You said 150 million, right?
Yeah, 150 million, they say.
That's probably Americans, because TikTok is supposed to be very huge. And I'd imagine they have over 1 billion if you add China into it.
I don't think so.
Well, TikTok is blocked in China.
Well, they have different TikTok in China.
They have different,
certain things that we have. Anyway, so when Bill 686 was floundering, which is an interesting like technical thing that happened, is Josh Hawley said, you know what, instead of this whole thing, because TikTok basically calls for the ability to surveil and for the Secretary of Commerce to have unilateral discretionary powers to decide who they're going to go after for violating the Restrict Act, and basically that anyone who's using social media to subvert American interests, that this person would, and if they try to hide it using a VPN, they could spend 20 years in jail or be fined up to $1 million. This is a terrifying bill designed to chill and it's anyone who's questioning basically any of the institutional decisions of the United States is someone for the purpose of subverting American interests. That person is in violation of the Restrict Act. Think about what this means. Okay, if the Restrict Act was in effect in 2018, Okay, so then when 2020 story comes around and the Hunter Biden laptop story comes out, and there's claims by various people at that, powers that be, that the Biden laptop is Russian disinformation. If
Like 20 people or so, yeah.
Right. And even though the FBI, by the way, before the election in 2020, the FBI had said we don't think it's Russian disinformation, but
Sure.
that never was reported by mainstream media. So if they stuck with the narrative that it was Russian disinformation, and people like you or me are talking about it and promoting it, in theory, we would be liable if we're acting as agents, secretly acting as agents on behalf of Putin or China or some foreign entity, any foreign entity, really. So what that would mean is someone who's talking about this, you can understand how they could go to a court, get a warrant to surveil us, and I mean literally you and me personally, to see whether or not our motivations for talking about this are to subvert American interests, that we're on Putin's payroll or Xi's payroll,
Joe,
and to
I
literally
find it-
start tapping our phones, and just because we're engaging in speech on social media that's questioning the narrative, and basically that's what it is. If you question the narrative and you're doing it to help a foreign government, you are now in violation of the Restrict Act. So anyone who questions the narrative, you can understand that person, they can get a warrant to make sure to check and look into that person and see whether or not they're on Putin's payroll.
By the way, I don't want to downplay what you just said, but it's almost charming that they'd actually get a warrant. That's something kind of refreshing. Now, I mean, pretty much now they just surveil.
And by the way,
Well, and it's interesting to say that they're making a law to say we hate China so much that we're going to act like China.
Yeah. So that brings me to the second bill. So when this was floundering, and this, by the way, is supported by Republicans, it's supported and by Democrats, and all the ones who support it are the classic neocons, the corporatists, right? And that's why people say we have a uniparty. The Republican, there's no difference between Republicans and Democrats. If you look at the list there, it's brought forward by Mark Warner, a Democrat. It's supported by Lindsey Graham and Mitt Romney, and basically every corporate shill you can think of. There's like 30 of them that are all sponsoring this bill. And Lindsey Graham was embarrassed when he was on when he was on with Waters guy.
I don't believe you. Lindsey Graham cannot be embarrassed.
Oh, he was backtracking when they were asking him, why are you supporting this bill? And he's like, well, we didn't support it. He's like, here is your name on it. He's like, oh, I gotta go back and review it. So, but it's like, I mean, this is such a breach of our basic Fourth Amendment rights. I mean, it's looking to just shred the Bill of Rights. And what Josh Hawley did was he said, all right, let's make a standalone bill to ban TikTok.
Also known as Hold My Beer.
Well, so now this raises a very, very interesting and complex philosophical question. And there's a rule in the Senate that if you get unanimity of all 100 senators agree with it, the bill gets fast-tracked to the House of Representatives. And it's a much quicker process. If you don't get that unanimity, apparently, I don't know about congressional procedures, but apparently it takes much, much longer to get that bill rammed through into becoming an act.
Well, I wish that worked for daylight savings time. They got 100% on that one, and my clock's still changed.
Well,
that's stopping at the end of this year, isn't it?
No, you could keep kicking the can.
They got 99. They got 99-1 on this ban TikTok thing, and the one guy who stood up against it was Rand Paul, and he's like, so weird, basically, well, here's why. I mean, and this is an interesting philosophical question. He just asked the same question you asked, Jeff, which he's like, so you have problems with China because they basically will silence anyone they disagree with. And our response is to silence TikTok because we disagree with them. Like, how does that make any sense? Like, that's, the classic libertarian perspective, which is like, no, that's not why you trying to crush down this one company. We don't have any research into the impact that they're having or anything of that nature. Now, personally, if you ask me, do I think TikTok is a terrible thing?
It's horrible.
Youth? Yeah, of course.
Cultural rot is just awful coming from it.
But you do sort of have to step back and ask yourself, like, are we sacrificing our principles in order to protect ourselves? And And is that necessarily the right step? And the other legal element, which I raised with Legal Mindset, and I'll ask to these other two attorneys here, isn't there a habeas corpus element here that you're sort of making, that you're passing a law against this individual corporation, that it sort of makes you ask a question like, are you even able to do that? Is that you're targeting one company and saying you're illegal? Like that's I don't understand how that works. Like that just it's very strange to me. I know that's not a person, but it's like, I mean, a corporation we treat as like, another type of person. So what do you guys think about the habeas corpus?
There's been an attack on habeas corpus for the last decade and a half, at least.
And I haven't read the bill, but maybe it's written to create a class of companies it would apply to that only happens to have TikTok in it. I don't know how they wrote the bill.
That's a good point. But do you think that the habeas corpus question could be a valid question as to the legitimacy of the bill, or that do you think that habeas corpus does not apply to a corporation? That's my question, really. Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but if it did, I think they would just dodge it by writing it and then punt it to the Supreme Court for years later, and the effect would already be there and all that. They don't seem to care whether the laws they pass are constitutional anyway, or if they even bother to pass laws, they just have the president do it. Can't he just do whatever he wants now?
Yeah,
he can just put you in jail if he wants. He can ban anything. He can give anything away. He can cancel any debt. He can award money. They want an emperor, that not a president. So
that's what DACA did. That's why after the DACA decision, Trump's like, I'm president. I got a pen. So
yeah.
Can I point out something that is just an interesting progression? The typical thing before is if you went against anything, right? Early oddies, it was, so you support terrorism. If you're like, hey, things are going too far here, getting too deep into surveillance. So you like terrorism, you want them to do that. So now that kind of went down, and then we've moved to CP. And it was like, so you want to support CP. You're fine with these predators out there and stuff. So now we've gone from CP to CCP. Is anybody liking this progression?
And soon it'll be CCCP, and we'll be back to the Soviet Union.
Bingo. Well, but we're already there with Russia. Russia.
Well, we talked about, or Joe did similar demographic and all that, and it's a valid counterpoint to that the good old days weren't always so good, that there were flaws, and we saw things wrong because we'd been lied to and all that. But I also look at it and I try and say, well, yeah, okay, I get that, not get off my lawn sort of thing. But the other part is, but the values are changing, and I think we did have across political stripes a respect for, say, freedom or free speech, or the idea of individual freedom.
You mean like women were women?
Well, I mean a limit on government.
girls and men.
People believe that the government had a limit, and they don't. Free speech doesn't seem to be a concept people care about anymore. All they care about is, if the government tells me this is dangerous, I will do anything they say. I'll hide in my basement. I'll put a mask on my 3-year-old kid for 3 years. I don't care about the consequences to education, civil liberties, anything else. The government can do whatever they want as long as it keeps me safe. And
you're right. We had, what is it, Skokie versus Illinois. We had Flint, People versus Larry Flint. We had, oh God, who was it? People were supporting actual marching Nazis, saying, "Hey, that's all right." Skokie. Actual ones. So you're right. Obviously, we were fooled left and right and here and there, but there were some things that I feel like, yes, that we sort of supported the Bill of Rights to a point. Very salient point. Let's go, Brandon. What do we think of Ron DeSantis selling his soul to the Bush dynasty? And liberals have modified habeas corpus for the guilty.
And I don't know if anybody can hear my 50-pound English bulldog snoring over here, but it's pretty loud to me. I hope nobody else is here. I have the mic filter on, hopefully to block it out. But
that's why you have a dynamic mic, right?
I thought it was gas.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
All right. So as long as it's not annoying anyone, then I won't worry about it. Because I'm like, do I wake her up? She's being noisy as hell over here.
Nah, let her sleep. That's awesome. Okay, so what is coming up for folks that I don't know what cases are out there. I'm waiting for Baldwin to settle down with the final attorneys, and I figure by the end it's going to be a parking ticket for him.
Well, they pulled out the big guns for that, though, too. I mean, they've got the local guy. They said, you can step aside now. We're bringing in, 2 special prosecutors?
Well, because she quit. I mean, this woman, who's a Soros-funded DA, by the way, has been ducking it the entire time. And keep in mind that the DA is determining the charges, not the special prosecutor. The DA actually has to file the charges. And I sometimes wonder if sometimes asking for too much can be very helpful to, shall we say, the defendant, who is beloved by some of the same people that George Soros likes. I'm just pointing it out. Like, if you happen to say, I'm going to go ahead and use an enhancement charge that I can't actually put into place, and then it gets tossed away, I pull in a prosecutor that's going to get tossed on their ass, then the defendant can always say, oh, by the way, I want a speedy trial too. Look, it's almost like a comedy of errors. And I do wonder, is this just monumental stupidity, or is there actual strategy involved?
I think it's monumental stupidity. That's the problem with taking, 14, 15 months to bring the charges, when you actually have new laws enacted between the time it happened and the time you bring the charges, and you go, oh, wait, we have this. And then you have to have someone later on going, you realize that really wasn't a law when this happened, right? You can't really charge them. And they're like, oh, shit. If they would have, this should have been charged a week after it happened. It is so cut and dried, in my view, that the fact it took this long is ludicrous.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, what about the gun? So even when you call in the FBI to test the gun is broken during the testing. I don't care how you want to put it down. Baldwin's whole thing of, I didn't pull the trigger, now nobody can disprove in court, in my opinion, because they cannot duplicate it. No, you're depending on FBI testimony. The defense has a right to prove out their theory, but they can't prove out the theory with the gun that the prosecution destroyed. I don't think that they're wrong on that.
The destruction of that gun is the actual proof, though. Like, they tried so hard to get it to do what he said.
I know that's
did,
reality.
They broke it.
But it's a brilliant argument, though, because they can't. Can they duplicate it? No.
Maybe they can't duplicate it, but if that type of gun scientifically cannot fire itself, in that case, I don't know that they need to duplicate the gun. I mean, the point is, if you have expert testimony that's saying that it's impossible for that to go off without someone actually moving their finger.
No, it's impossible for a perfectly working gun in mint condition from the factory. But again, now we don't have that scenario. And again, believe me, I know he was saying it was bullshit. It was obvious.
I know.
Everybody knows it's bullshit. But I think that they screwed this up, in a sense that now the defense does have something, and they maybe I'm wrong. Again, you're the lawyers. Maybe they can get that gun removed.
Do we know what broke in it, though?
The firing mechanism, it can no longer fire at all.
Because I don't know.
They were beating it. It's like the FBI was trying to duplicate. I think they were like literally beating it with a hammer, trying to see if, like, okay, so if I hit the back of it with a hammer, will it actually go down? And ultimately it broke the mechanism.
Yeah,
now,
if you cock that gun, you have to have the trigger back for it to drop on the firing pin. That's just how they're made.
Yes, the 4-stroke style, because I've talked to Seth Kinney about it.
Yeah, and that was the dumb thing. He chose to make this ridiculous argument on literally one of the very few firearms in human history that made what he alleged to have happened impossible to happen.
Yes, well, I'm not saying he's a genius.
Yeah.
If he had shut up, he would be in better shape than Dave Halls. But at the rate we're going right now, Dave Halls, who copped the plea, may suffer more than everybody else. It is the biggest irony in the world.
I think Baldwin has to plead out before this is over. I don't think there's any way he can win this. I think he's just got to go, look, he'll cop the same deal, like a 6-month, like a plea in abeyance or something that'll go away. He'll say, yeah, my bad, I won't do anything wrong for the next 6 months and get it off my record.
You really think so? I don't know. I mean, because it's like, if he just keeps waiting, so far every break has gone his way since they actually filed, in my opinion.
You're not wrong. I can't. That's what that hearing is supposed to be on May 3rd, right?
I guess it keeps getting changed because we don't even know who the lawyers are.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean they've what, 2 new prosecutors. It's a complete nightmare. So then they have to catch up on the case. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. That's where I got to say the defense is on the ball. You know, now they've changed it up again, and he asked for a speedy trial. They deliberately filed, I want a speedy trial. So now, you know, the time is getting very compressed for them to get involved in the case. Alec Baldwin has extremely deep pockets. For any expert in the world, by the way, Jeff, and everybody else, that can come in and argue the different point. And it can be argued that a gun that is in not good condition could do that. That is proven. There are also other methodologies of a gun that has been modified can do it, because a quick draw, they do have.
You still have to cock it. You still have to cock it. You got to have enough spring force on this thing or something.
No. It can be modified to have fanning.
Yeah, no, I know. But fanning is cocking it.
Fanning, you don't pull the trigger. So again,
but you have to cock it. You have to do something to that gun. Because it's a single action firearm. I mean, I know about guns. I know more about guns than law. And that dude fired that gun either by pulling the trigger or the hammer or both. If it was broken, it could have just been.
But he said he pulled the hammer.
And like you said, and so my point is, you pulled a hammer on a loaded gun on a person, that probably still meets the definition.
But it was under it was under the directions of that person, which, by the way, is done in Hollywood. I don't care what anybody breaks down. And so now we're getting an argument over procedure and filming, which is a whole nother animal. And that's the problem, is it's so cloudy. To me, there's one thing that is impossible to get out of, but nobody's talking about it. Where the hell did the live round come from? Because that is the biggest one. While we're arguing over trigger pulls or anything else, that's completely irrelevant with a blank or a dummy, which is supposed to be there.
Let's go on Hannah Gutierrez-Reed shoulder for sure. I mean, because she was bragging about how she had this cool new pouch that let her have different types of rounds in her bag at the same time, and she didn't do herself any favors.
No, I agree. And by the way, she's the only favor she's doing herself right now is just shutting up, because everything that happens with Baldwin is happening with her.
Well, see, and that's why I suspect it was you or somebody else I told that I thought she was going to be the one that flipped, because she's at the center of all. She knows what every single person in this did negligently. I thought she would be the one that would flip and rat everyone else out. And I think she still may do that and turn witness against Baldwin to talk about how, she was specifically told by people not to do her job as the armorer, how he refused to do this, how he said he didn't need it, how he broke all of these rules.
Well, I have the
flip against.
We broke the email that was used in the Times about Gabrielle Pickle, the letter. I got it. But yeah,
were you surprised that Pickle wasn't charged? I thought for sure she was one of the people that would be charged for specifically telling the armorer, don't do your job as the armorer. Do not do any more training. Do not do any. I thought for sure she would be charged.
Well, there was that. That was a giant problem. Another one was COVID protocols. Because some people could argue that Helena Hutchins was a victim of COVID protocols. And by that, it was literally part of it that they didn't want the armorer too close. There was too many damn people. And it's like, okay, so the one.
She's another COVID death.
Yes.
Like,
technically.
Helena Hutchins was shot through the chest. Did she get the jab?
That wouldn't be the strangest application of a COVID death counting.
Well, actually, George Floyd was a COVID death. I've always wanted to know if he was counted. Because he had COVID when he died, and they were counting people who had COVID when they died. No, he didn't. No, absolutely. George Floyd had COVID when he died, and I really want to look at the state records and see if he was counted in the rolls like many other people who had COVID when they died.
That's like funny / not funny.
Irony.
I didn't know that.
I don't know if he's on that list. If I was Derek Chauvin's counsel, I would raise that on appeal.
But yeah, I think Pickle.
The state admitted that he was a COVID death.
Pickle is very lucky, and there were so many other circumstances. Like Video Village was down because the camera crew quit, and Video Village was down. Video Village is where they're all outside of the area looking at monitors. If Video Village was up, Helena Hutchins never would have been in front of him when the gun was pointed anyway, because the gun would have been pointed at the camera. The person, ironically, who would have been at risk is Lane Looper, who's the focus puller, who's the one who quit because he would have been the one by the camera at the time when Baldwin is being directed. There's so much to that
and
story.
Jensen Ackles too. I like his interview where he was saying he was supposed to be pointing that weapon at me a few minutes after this.
Yeah,
And that's why his wife freaked out. She's saying, my guy could be dead because of this jackass. Ackles is the one that he has the righteous indignation behind him, and it really came out, I think, in his questioning video, his interview by the police. We're saying, yeah, the only reason it wasn't me was because we weren't actually filming. That's pretty serious.
Wow.
Yeah, but then again, and this is where I really feel like we're losing sight on something that needs to actually be investigated deeply. Where the F did the live rounds plural originate? That I feel like they've stopped looking. They've just done their charges, but that's really the question. I mean, no matter how it breaks down, whoever got those rounds on the set, I think you have a case. Everybody else, yeah, you may still have it, whatever. But why do we keep ignoring that? Because this is almost a distraction in comparison to the liability of that.
Well,
there were
I
questions.
think a civil litigation attorney would tell you that they have no interest in finding anyone really beyond the I don't know if they have comparative fault in New Mexico. It's in New Mexico, right? So I don't know if they have comparative fault, like what the standards are there. But if you're a civil attorney, you want that judgment against Alex Baldwin. Probably.
Oh, it does. So deep pockets, sure.
I mean,
but they already got it. That's that's another funny part of this whole thing is that
they got an award.
No, he settled with her husband is executive producer on Rust, which is filming any day. No, it films next month.
Yeah,
in April.
Which that's all pretty amazing.
The widow is literally the executive producer of the damn movie now as part of the settlement.
And he has that amazing indemnity clause in his contract. It says he gets indemnified for any liability of any nature whatsoever. So literally, he's not going to pay a damn dime out of his own pocket for this, no matter what happens civilly. He gets indemnified by the film company.
You guys think that movie is going to do well because of this, or you think
it has to? Because if it doesn't, her family doesn't get the money.
Well, that's what I would
with whatever point system they've got. If this movie has to do well, so the victim's family gets compensated.
I guarantee that Alec Baldwin ponied up a little more than a point. I'm sure that there's I mean, he put a lot of property up for sale, different things like that.
Yeah.
Somehow money from his direction, either him or people he knows or insurance, something from him, I think, led to cash in Matthew Hutchins' pocket. And you still have Gloria Allred sniffing around trying to get every last bit she can from the situation.
But what I was really asking is, like, I don't know if you guys remember the movie The Crow where Brandon Lee died on set. And supposedly, like, that boosted their sales by, like, at least like 10%, I think, because the fact that he died on set during the filming.
That
was Bruce Lee's son, by the way, Brandon Lee. In case
I know, who also died tragically in a weird scenario. So 2 generations of father and son who died both weirdly.
Mm-hmm. Well, no one knows how Bruce Lee died, right?
I think it was like some sort of stomach thing. I don't remember. I'd have to look it up, but it's
ruptured appendix or ruptured spine.
I heard a martial arts expert speculate that he was definitely murdered by someone from by a team of martial arts experts from the Orient, because he brought martial arts to America. I don't know. That's a good deep dive for you right there. What happened to Bruce Lee? That's an untold story right there. People don't appreciate. You guys can't appreciate whatever you think of Chuck Norris or or Jackie Chan. Bruce Lee is the father of all this, and he was a brilliant martial arts expert.
Yes.
Well, Janelle Villegas here in chat raised an interesting question. It'd be interesting to get people's comments. So why is it up to Baldwin to check? It's not his sole responsibility, because he is the last person to point a weapon at someone and do something with it. That's why it's up to him to check. He is literally the last line of defense against murdering someone.
Here's the problem, though.
That's basic gun safety, isn't it?
No. Here's the problem.
Yeah.
There's SAG guidelines and things like that. So there's common sense, and especially people who handle guns will say, well, absolutely, duh, no shit. However, that is not necessarily the case in Hollywood. And you can go back and forth, and this is all factual. Some actors are diligent as hell. George Clooney makes a point of it. Will Smith has been shown when he's not slapping people, he does check his guns really well. And there are other ones who say, no, that's not my job. And Baldwin did make a statement, which is not untrue, when he said, I don't bother with it because I'm told don't do it. We're the armorer. You're the actor.
Lies.
No, this is not a lie.
No, he's lying.
No, he's not. He is not lying, Joe. This is factual stuff that is out there.
No, I know he said that.
Yeah,
No.
When you are
that
pointing
is-
a gun at anyone for any reason, you are the last line of defense against.
I
an
agree
actor.
with you in terms of gun safety and anybody who's dealing with a real gun in reality. Now, let's get back to what I was talking about. This is Hollywood, and they have actual SAG guidelines and things like that, and they do have standards that are on the set. And what you were saying, and what I personally believe, are completely disputed. It is not consistent. Hopefully it becomes consistent, but the people who are responsible for the gun and the actual checking of it in writing are the first assistant director, who is the safety officer on the set, who is to tell and have the armorer show them. So they're not supposed to do it. They're not even supposed to handle it. That's even in dispute, but I've gone back and forth with Seth Kenney about it, who supplied the gun, if anybody doesn't know who Seth Kenney is. On that situation, Dave Hall should have never been handling the gun. So that's another problem. You have a chain of custody issue. But Dave Hall is supposed to look at Hannah when she hands the gun over to Alec Baldwin and say, show me. Okay, ... She's supposed to show him and then hand it to Alec Baldwin. That is actually the written procedure in the SAG guidelines. So again, we have problems in the sense that Steve, you're a gun guy. I mean, a very deep gun guy. And there are standards at a range. I was in the military. You were in the military. There's standards there. There's standards in the police. That's not necessarily standards in Hollywood.
Should I tell you why it's a lie? Why I said lie?
Sure.
Or you want to just... we can go to Steve. I mean, Steve, he is the gun guy. So I definitely defer to you, Steve. And I'm not saying that facetiously at all. I genuinely mean that. You know a billion times more about guns than I'll ever know. I'm just saying the reason I call that a lie is because they had a backup armorer there because people were leaving because there was so much danger, and because there have been so many different accidents.
Who was the backup armorer?
I don't remember. I don't remember the name.
I know every person on the set. Who was the backup armorer?
Didn't someone quit a week earlier?
No, but people quit. The camera people quit that day. There was no backup armorer.
Wasn't there a safety person who basically said that this place is too reckless?
That was the camera crew, and they walked off that morning.
Oh, so you're saying that was the original armorer who was there, who handed them the gun?
Yes, Hannah Gutierrez Reed was the armorer on the set. She was supplied the gun from Seth Kenney. Sarah Zachary was the prop master. I can name every person on that show. So there was no backup armorer. That Hannah was the armorer. They would have loved, I'm sure, to get other people, and they did put up, to hire different people. But Hannah Reed's father, Estelle Reed, world famous, one of the top gun people in the world. So there's a nepotism question, but no, Hannah Gutierrez Reed was the armorer.
And I hate to keep going back to the chatter, but Janelle Vegas said, y'all see John Wick 4? You think they all stopping and checking all those guns while filming? Yes, I do. Yeah. And maybe Southern Luck can comment more on this. I mean, this is maybe it's just my worldview growing up in Utah and having a gun from when I was 6 years old is when I got my first actual 22. And yes, I don't care if someone hands you a gun. If someone hands you a gun and says, here, this is a perfectly safe, unloaded gun, point it at your temple and pull the trigger.
I agree.
Are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? So like John Wick 4, damn well, especially with, Keanu Reeves has some of the greatest just like gun safety regimens and shooting regimens that I've ever seen in Hollywood. He's checking everything.
He probably has 3 or 4 armorers on that set too, by the way.
And even Jensen Ackles said when he gets he said, I don't care who hands me this gun and what they tell me, I dry fire 6 shots into the dirt before I do anything.
A lot of people do. I'm not disputing any of that.
Yeah.
However, this is what is common sense in reality.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to go to Alec Baldwin for common sense.
Oh, it's also that this is a guy. This is a guy who has almost more hubris than any person walking the planet, claiming that the reason he wouldn't check the gun is because that would offend some underling underneath him, and he's worried about offending some underling underneath him. The last thing I think Alec Baldwin has ever been worried about is offending some underling.
By the way, Alec Baldwin did reposted on Instagram some criticism about gun control dealing with Nashville. Right on schedule with good old Alec.
Well,
But,
he can be
Steve,
responsible and someone else can too, right? I mean, he was the last line of defense with that gun. He should have checked it. I don't think that's inconsistent either with what Joe was saying, but somebody brought a live round there, and I don't even know if that's the person who put it in the gun. Somebody put it in the gun. Somebody put a live round, at least one, I don't know if there were others, into this gun.
Hannah put it in the gun.
So, I mean, hello.
That is proven. No. Hannah put it in the gun.
Yeah.
We don't know
and
if
she's
brought
facing
it to,
charges too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she's
She
got
is.
charges too.
Same charges as Baldwin.
Yeah.
Can you tell when you're looking at a round whether it's a live round or not?
It's difficult, but yes, because in the case of a dummy round, the particular ones have a hole in the side and the edge, and the primer has been fired or removed. That's the only way you can tell specifically. You also can shake it, and there's a BB inside.
At very worst, you shake it and you can hear the difference. At very least, even if the primer hasn't been fired, even if it is a dummy round, shake it and you can tell.
But hold on, one thing, Jeff, on that, did you know what happened with the Crow? Because that was a poorly done dummy round scenario where
but there was also the obstruction in the barrel of that as well,
which was the bullet itself, because the primer had not been fired, and when the bullet was inside of the gun, it was enough to get just enough pressure for the bullet to lodge in the barrel. So just enough pressure for the bullet to go. Then when they put a blank in, it turned into an actual bullet, and that's why, I mean, that was a complete freak.
That was the freakiest of freak accidents that could happen. Yeah.
But it is relevant.
But that goes to the point. You have to treat these firearms like they are firearms.
I agree.
This is an instrument of death. And we say prop gun. Prop gun doesn't mean fake gun. It just means it's being used as a prop on the set. And you are literally holding something that can take the life of another human being.
Right. Prop gun means it is owned by the property department.
Yes.
That is what prop means. So it's like a prop golf club. It's still a golf club.
And and see, my father grew up in Star Valley, Wyoming, literally in a 1-room log cabin, because that's just how freaking poor they were before in the Great Depression. And I remember talking to him saying, you had these, I mean, hell, even in my high school, if you didn't have a gun rack, people looked at you sideways. You had to have at least, I mean, it was like you were judged how cool you were by how many guns you had in your gun rack in the back of your truck in high school. But my father, he's like, he grew up like Little House on the Prairie with the loaded rifle above the door of the house. And I remember talking to him, this was after Columbine. Why didn't these shootings happen in your day? He said, because if you even looked at that gun over the door, you'd get your ass beat.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, okay, Steve,
that level of respect.
Steve, you were in the military. What happened if anybody pointed a weapon any direction other than up?
Well, it's all situational, and to connect it back to this, I can say you have a procedure, you're supposed to check it because that's the right thing to do, and it's dangerous if you don't. And I can see somebody like Alec Baldwin not doing it. It's probably trouble to open up a single action revolver and move the cylinder around. I'll just, no one's gotten shot before. I'll just trust this system. And I think as far as the Army goes, it depends on where you were in the Army and who you were with. Now, did guns get pointed at people? Oh yeah, because you train with a mile system and stuff like that with blanks in it, and you're pointing it because that's how you score the
okay,
points.
but hold on now. To clarify, the mile system, you also have an object over the barrel of the gun on the
right. That's what makes it cycle. That's what makes it cycle.
And for those that don't know, Miles gear is essentially like really cool laser tag.
It is, yeah. It's a military, yes.
Yeah.
So, you're doing that all the time. But of course, you do have the blank adapter on the end of the gun, but you can take the blank adapter off.
Mm-hmm.
You can fire a piece of cleaning rod if you needed to. I mean, this is stuff you need to know if you're going to be doing exercises around Fort Bragg in case you run into some kind of group or whatever. So gun safety still mattered then. But, I'm not going to tell you that I didn't see people point guns around and flag people. Now,
yeah, but they get their asses beat where I was. I mean, it was not taken seriously. Or if you go to the range that day and there's a round missing.
Now at the range, the range is more serious. And I've done a lot of competition shooting, and flagging people is highly discouraged. And there's a lot of safety rules, and you have discouraged. It is highly discouraged, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, right?
Of course, there's always
you're
assholes.
DQ'd and you're gone, and if you keep doing it, you can't come back, and all that. But does it happen? Yeah. I mean, people get adrenaline and they don't handle their guns well. And I saw a guy, you're not supposed to break the 180. He, instead of going around the right way, he completely turned around. He completely turned around and swept everybody with the gun. But it just was, with a loaded gun. There's no blanks there. He was at USPSA. So, I mean, things happen with guns, but it's not an excuse to violate the procedures that are there for safety just because it might happen somewhere else, or other people do it, or it didn't get anybody killed the other times, right? So to me, he doesn't get off for that. And whether he's lying or not lying, I don't think either one of those is an excuse.
But you just said procedures, Steve, and I think that's what. No, hold on. I think that's where the problem starts to come in, because they don't have that particular procedure. A lot of what you're describing right there, and I really encourage you all, go get the SAG guidelines and really read them. And you're going to go, oh, shit, this is a problem. Because nowhere in that SAG guidelines does it say that Alec Baldwin has to fire the rounds. Nowhere in the SAG guidelines does it say. It explicitly does state that the first AD and the armor, that the first AD's responsibility as the safety officer is to make certain. So I think the guidelines have to be changed. I think there's a giant problem, but it does come into a factor when you have Alec Baldwin. And I'm not trying to excuse him, because as a person, he should know better. For God's sake, do you know what his father did?
Oh, yeah.
His father was the rifle coach for his high school. His father had been a rifle coach for so long that he died with like massive lead poisoning. I'm not kidding. Inside of him, from being in indoor range and breathing that shit. I'm not kidding. So,
but Eric, to make sure I'm understanding your point right, because I would have and have assumed the opposite. I have not read the documents. You're saying they have a procedure for gun safety, and it does not include the final person who's going to use the gun for the scene and who will point it towards other people. It doesn't include them checking the gun. That is terrible.
I don't believe that it does. And like I said, go double check me. But
I have not read it.
Yeah, but I may have to find it, but it's really problematic, because it's saying the armorer. And so that's why I was telling Joe, careful on the line, because Alec Baldwin is not lying. Many actors have been saying that the armorer say, it's give me that, I will check that.
Well, I'm going with Joe on this. If Joe says that Alec Baldwin said because I didn't want to offend somebody.
Oh, he did say that.
That is clearly a lie. That's a lie. He doesn't care about offending anybody.
Well,
at least that's a lie.
Well, I don't know. He likes to flirt with the women like he did with the cops. I don't know. I'm not going to get into that. He selectively cares.
That is not true. I don't flirt with any women. Oh, you're talking Alex. Sorry, I was very.
I don't know. Are you trying to tell us something, Joe?
No.
I mean, I know you're reading.
I was saying I don't. You were just talking about me a second ago, and then you're saying, just clarify.
He's sensitive.
No, this gets viewed by people. Everyone takes things. All right, move on.
Yes, Alec does, and if you watch the interview, the full interrogation with the cops, 1 second he's a complete expert on everything that goes on with the guns, and the next second oh geez, I don't know.
Eric, that's what,
back and forth.
that's what I wanted to say. I mean, that's all things like, well, it's not all his fault. That's the beauty of criminal negligence. You can have 4 people involved, and all 4 people can be criminally negligent with regard to the outcome. And you say, even if it's not all his fault, it's exactly what you were saying during his interrogation. Like, I'm just this, like unfrozen caveman actor. I don't know anything about these guns. And by the end of the interview, he's like, well, here's the 4 different kinds of rounds there are, and here's how you can tell them all apart. And he, as you said, he does this. I'm an expert. I'm not an expert. And that sort of alleviates any of his, it just does away with his arguments that he's not responsible and he doesn't know anything, because he's proven during his initial interview with the police that he knows the difference between these rounds and not, and he could easily have checked. So we're not just saying like Alec Baldwin is 100% responsible. We're saying that he is criminally negligent. It was what the prosecution is arguing, but also for the same exact accident, there's 3 other people that are criminally negligent.
Sure. And all I'm saying is that there are problems with the clouding, and yes, he is negligent, but the levels go up and down, according to, a lot of other factors too. And I think it makes it really difficult to nail him down, especially with the lawyers shredding the cases. They're overcharging 1 minute. They're doing, the DA's office, special prosecutor, you pick, I feel like they're self-owning like crazy. They're kind of handing it to him. And I'm also being critical of the SAG guidelines themselves, which I think everybody should really look at and say, hey, how is this being written? And then most of all, again, can we please still investigate where the hell the live rounds came from to begin with? I don't think that's unreasonable.
Yeah, that sounds fair. Important.
But, well, geez, I feel like I just sucked the oxygen out of the room. But on that note, where can everybody find you? I'm going to start with Legal Vices. Last of the Law Rexes.
People have dubbed me the Law Rex.
Why?
Instead of the Lorax, because of the mustache.
I know.
Like the Dr. Zeus Lorax there, but anyway. Right there on Legal Vices, that's the channel. You want to definitely go there and subscribe to the cool stuff, because we have an amazing week ahead of us. Every Monday, because that's 90%, probably about 70% of what I do is maritime law, and the other 30% is the rest of things. So every Monday we do a Maritime Monday. We're doing a really, really cool Maritime Monday this Monday, and then Tuesday we've had the Zachariah Anderson trial out of Wisconsin that just had an absolute, as far as I'm concerned, deplorable verdict by the jury of guilty. In this trial, the Anderson trial made the Alex Murdaugh trial look like it was the most heavily evidenced trial in the history of the universe. In the Zachariah Anderson conviction, we had no body, we had no murder weapon, we had no DNA at the scene. The suspect's DNA wasn't at the scene. There was no confirmed blood or DNA at the in anything that was owned by the defense. The best thing they could do was find a tiny, literally a pinprick sized, dark colored material in the back of a van that they couldn't test for blood because it was too small. And they ran a DNA test, and the best they could say was they could not exclude the defendant as the contributor of the DNA. It was the only thing they could say with absolute certainty was it was a single source male DNA. And this guy was convicted of murder, hiding a corpse, and 2 counts of stalking. I'm going to be talking to his brother on Tuesday and his sister on Wednesday. And then Thursday, we're going to continue the O.J. Simpson thing that we've been doing for 28 weeks now, the cross-examination, just to show people how when you get F. Lee Bailey and Barry Scheck, 2 master craftsmen of defense law, practicing their craft in an absolute immaculate way. Barry Scheck's cross-examination of Dennis Fung, the criminologist, has been said to be the greatest cross-examination since the Scopes Monkey trial. It is amazing, and we're going to do that. And then Friday is just going to be a drunken grift stream.
Sold. All right, Steve.
Well, if you want to watch what I do, which I'm not going to be able to make it as exciting as Jeff made his stuff sound, and it's Southern law. Final tie-in on that, just to show how old I am. I was in the courtroom when Johnny Cochran and F. Lee Bailey came to Winston-Salem, North Carolina for the Mark Furman tapes, because the firm I worked for was the local counsel for the woman who owned that and the commercial value argument. So I watched Cochran in person. F. Lee Bailey didn't do anything in that hearing, but Cochran, even though he lost at the trial level and it got reversed by the Court of Appeals, he was really good. He was as good as they said he was, in my opinion, at that hearing. Ancient stuff there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
I was a two. It was like the Simpson trial started in the middle part of my 2L and ended in the middle part of my 3L. So.
Wow. Okay, now, Joe, we always, on this show especially, we always like to, learn where people can find Joe if he's got something coming up, and then he always likes to leave us with a word of wisdom. And people watch this show. They watch over 2 hours just to see.
They wait the final words of wisdom,
because they're like, "Will Joe give us an actual word of wisdom at the end of the day?" So this is the normal way we close the show, folks. And so, Joe, where can people find you?
Well, my name is Joe Neerman. People call me Good Lawgic. That's my channel on YouTube. I really appreciate if you could sign up on Locals. I'm also available on Rumble or even on Facebook now. And just want to point out that the Lorax is socialist drivel, and it's the worst thing Seuss ever produced. It's anti-capitalism. It is the worst thing imaginable. If you want to basically read about how we should just we should basically abandon everything about capitalism.